The Armenian Genocide, a tragedy of a century ago. Today, we start with a film to re-examine this history and explore its profound impact on the modern world. In the small Turkish town of Mardin in Anatolia, a little blacksmith named Nazaret Manujan had twin girls and lived a life full of love with his wife. One night, he was captured by soldiers of the Ottoman Empire. He worked with many Armenians to build roads in the desert under the supervision of bandits and mercenaries. He witnessed his compatriots dying from exhaustion and disease, being whipped and killed by Turkish soldiers, and saw Armenians forced into death marches, with women being raped. Some Armenians converted to Islam to save their lives, while the rest were bound together and taken to remote cliffs to be killed with cold weapons. Nazaret Manujan survived, but a cut to his trachea rendered him mute. He was taken in by a guerrilla group, surviving by robbing wealthy merchants, and unexpectedly encountered someone from his hometown, learning about the massacre that had taken place there. He decided to leave in search of his family. Along the way, he saw many bodies of Armenians. Upon reaching his hometown, he found it in ruins, with his relatives living in a refugee camp. His sister was dying, and powerless to help her, he tearfully ended her life. Afterward, he concealed his true identity, and, with the help of kind Arabs, managed to find work in a soap factory. It wasn't until World War I ended and Turkey faced defeat and decline that the angry Armenians expelled Ottoman representatives and supporters from their homes. Nazaret learned that his daughter was still alive and set out to find her. He traveled through Syria and Lebanon towards the sea, towards Cuba, and towards the United States, enduring many hardships until he finally found his daughter Lusin, now crippled, while his other daughter, Arseni, had died of illness. Their reunion was marked by tears. The first half of the movie The Cut, which premiered in 2015, epically reenacts scenes from the Armenian Genocide by Ottoman Turkey from 1915 to 1917. Anatolia, located in the western part of Asia, spans the Asian portion of modern-day Turkey. This region, comprising plains, mountains, and plateaus, serves as a crucial land bridge between Asia and Europe. Since the 6th century BC, Armenians have settled in this area. In the 4th century AD, the Armenian kingdom adopted Christianity as its state religion. In the 13th century, the ancestors of the Turks moved to the area, embraced Islam, and established the Ottoman Empire in 1299. In 1453, the Ottoman Empire conquered the Byzantine Empire and moved its capital to Constantinople. By the time of the Russo-Turkish War in 1877, despite oppression by Ottoman Turkey, land erosion, and forced migration, Armenians resisted and even organized revolutionary parties. However, they generally maintained a relatively peaceful relationship with the Ottoman Empire and enjoyed a degree of autonomy. However, with the rise of nationalism in 19th century Europe and the decline of the Ottoman Empire, this relationship fundamentally changed. In 1878, the Russo-Turkish War ended with a victory for Russia, forcing the Ottoman Empire to sign the Treaty of San Stefano, which was later replaced by the Treaty of Berlin. The empire lost significant territory on the Balkan Peninsula, Bulgaria gained autonomous status, and Serbia, Romania, and Montenegro achieved independence. This also led to some Armenian regions being transferred to Russia. The Berlin Congress marked the emergence of the Armenian question in international diplomacy. The Turks realized for the first time that the Armenians were being used by the great powers to interfere in the politics of the Ottoman Empire. Ottoman leaders claimed Anatolia to be the last refuge of the Turkish nation, fearing it would strip away the empire like the Balkans. In order to maintain the unity of their empire and territorial integrity, they adopted more severe repressive measures. Especially between 1894 and 1896, the Hamidian massacre occurred, a large-scale massacre of Armenians, which intensified ethnic tensions and paved the way for the Armenian Genocide in the early 20th century. In 1908, the Young Turks came to power, promising reform and equality. However, they were essentially fervent nationalists, aiming to establish a pure Turkish state, setting the stage for a larger-scale massacre. From 1909 to 1914, the Turkish government implemented a series of harsh policies against Armenians, including expulsion, confiscation of property, and massacres. The preparation of these plans demonstrated their deliberate and systematic nature. The First Balkan War in 1912 nearly resulted in the loss of all European territories for the empire, with Muslims being expelled on a large scale from the Balkan Peninsula. The Ottoman Muslim society directed its anger at all Christians, among whom the Ottoman Armenians were considered the most dangerous element. Interior Minister Talat and Enver Pasha concluded by mid-1914 that they were an internal tumor that needed to be removed. The outbreak of World War I saw some Ottoman Armenians deserting to join Russian Armenian volunteer units, increasing the empire's suspicion of Armenians. War Minister Enver Pasha's disastrous invasion of Russian territory resulted in a crushing defeat for his troops. Enver blamed the Armenians, fueling the leader's paranoia. The Armenians must be eliminated to save the empire. From April 1914, massacres of Armenian men began near Bashkal in the Van Vilayet. The Turkish plan was to replace Armenians with Muslims to solidify the frontier. On the eve of World War I in 1914, Turkish authorities demanded that Armenians collaborate with Armenians inside Russia against Russia. This unreasonable demand was refused by the Armenians, who were then labeled as traitors. Shortly after the outbreak of World War I, Turkey joined the Central Powers. Armenians were conscripted into the army to serve the empire. However, the organized extermination of Armenians was underway. The government had resolved all technical issues related to the expulsion and elimination of Armenians. The executioners were criminals released from prisons. They were a group of bandits and social scum tasked with committing the most heinous crimes. Armenian officers in the Ottoman army were imprisoned, soldiers were disarmed and then killed. From April to June in Istanbul, Armenian elites such as writers, lawyers, and parliamentarians were exiled, expelled, and harmed. Then, the executioners set foot on the ancestral homeland of the Armenians, the region of Cilicia, and then to the entire area and roads where the empire's Armenians lived. From south to north. Everywhere. The Armenian population plummeted from 2 million to about 500,000, becoming one of the earliest genocides of the 20th century. The harrowing scenes depicted in the movie The Cut still fall short compared to the actual experiences of displacement, slaughter, and concentration camps that Armenians faced. Under the guise of relocation, the Ottoman government forced Armenians to trek to deserts, uninhabited areas, where they severely lacked food, water, and shelter, leading to mass deaths. Along the way or in remote areas, they were subjected to planned massacres using methods including shooting, stabbing, starvation, disease, and burning in a brutal manner. Additionally, there were crimes of forced labor, sexual violence, and enslavement, with the aim of completely exterminating the Armenian people. Although some of the main planners were arrested by the Allies after the war in an attempt to put them on trial, most went unpunished due to interventions by the new Republic of Turkey and international political considerations. Some fled abroad and ended their lives without facing trial. This chapter of history seems forgotten, just as Hitler said in 1939, who, after all, speaks today of the annihilation of the Armenians. However, some Armenians initiated assassination operations against the main planners and executors of the genocide. In the early 1920s, several were successfully eliminated. This includes Talat Pasha, the former Minister of the Interior of the Ottoman Empire, assassinated in Berlin on the 15th of March 1921. Beheading Shakir, one of the leaders of the special organization, also assassinated in Berlin on April 17, 1922, and the Ottoman Empire's Minister of the Navy, Cemal Pasha, stabbed to death in Tbilisi on July 21, 1922. These actions demonstrated Armenians' pursuit of justice and provided psychological solace to the victims of the massacre, and their families to some extent. Enver Pasha was killed by an Armenian member of the Soviet Red Army during a battle against the Soviets in August 1922. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, with the rise of nationalism and continuous loss of territory, coupled with the intervention of European powers, Armenian nationalists' protests and resistance activities were triggered. The Turkish government was concerned that the Armenian issue might be exploited by external forces, threatening the nation's sovereignty and territorial integrity. While this concern had some basis in reality, it should not serve as an excuse for implementing large-scale violence and ethnic cleansing. The Ottoman Turkey's response strategy, extensive suppression and massacre, failed to address the root issue, instead exacerbating ethnic conflicts, causing a huge humanitarian disaster, and leaving deep historical scars. Today, the Turkish government claims that the events of 1915 were a product of war and turmoil, with both Armenians and Turks suffering losses, rather than a one-sided, planned genocide against Armenians. It proposes studying this history together by establishing historical commissions and opening archives, a proposal rejected by Armenia, as the Armenian side and its supporters believe it might undermine the recognition and international acknowledgement of the genocidal nature of the events. This indicates that the issue of the Armenian genocide is not only a dispute over historical facts, but also involves multiple complex factors such as international relations, legal responsibilities, historical memory, and national identity.